Today I'm going to tell you a story so tense it will make your heart pound, set deep in the unforgiving silence of the American frontier, where the wind moves through endless grass and every shadow might be watching. It's a place where land loyalty and blood collide, and where one quiet ranch became the crossroads of greed, secrets, and justice. It all began with something small, a flicker of sunlight on metal in the tall grass, just enough to awaken a past that was never truly buried. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun hung low over the Wyoming plains, like a bloodied coin bleeding red across the endless grass that rolled toward the Bozeman Trail. Nora Kane straightened from the horse trough water, still dripping from the bucket in her calloused hands. The air carried the sharp, clean smell of sagebrush and the faint iron tang of the nearby railroad tracks, Union Pacific steel, that had sliced the territory open 6 years earlier and never quite healed. She moved deliberately the way she always did. Now slow, unhurried, every motion practiced to look ordinary. The blue cotton dress clung to her shoulders with the day's sweat. Her boots left shallow prints in the dry earth. Inside the house, the lamp was already lit. Jack sat at the rough pine table, newspaper spread before him, coffee gone cold in the tin cup. The headlines were the same as yesterday. Another stagecoach gone quiet somewhere north of Cheyenne. Another sheriff swearing it was just bad luck. Nora paused at the porch step, listening. Wind moved through the cottonwoods behind the barn, a low whisper that never quite settled. She had learned to hear the difference between wind and something else. Tonight the sound was wrong, too regular, too distant. A glint caught her eye again, the third time this week. Sunlight flashing off metal in the tall grass beyond the corral. Not a rifle barrel exactly, but close enough. She knew the shape of a carbine slung low, knew the way a man held it when he didn't want to be seen. Her stomach tightened, the old reflex she had spent 6 years trying to bury. She forced her gaze away, poured the last of the water into the horse's trough, and walked inside without hurry. Jack looked up. His face was lined deeper than it had been when they first came here, but the eyes were still steady. "You see anything out there?" he asked quietly. She set the bucket down. Just the wind playing tricks. He studied her a moment longer than necessary. Slade Carver's man came by again today. Left another offer. Double market for the water rights. Says the trail's changing fast and we'd be smart to get ahead of it. Nora poured herself coffee she didn't want, let the steam rise between them. "We've said no twice already. 3 times now." Jack folded the paper. He didn't like hearing it the third time. Said progress don't wait for folks who stand still. She sipped once, scalding her tongue, and welcomed the small pain. It grounded her. Progress, she repeated softly, the word tasting like dust. Outside, the light was failing fast. The horizon turned bruise purple. Nora stepped to the window, pretending to check the latch. In the fading glow, she counted them 6 riders moving in a loose line along the ridge, black bandanas at their throats, catching the last red light. Red Hollow Gang. She recognized the dappled gray at the lead Slade Carver's mount. She also saw the new man riding drag, young, bearded, holding his rifle too high and too tight, the way a green trooper did when he'd only fired on paper targets. Her fingers brushed the hidden seam inside her sleeve, where the old Colt had once ridden. The habit was still there, muscle memory that never quite died. She let her hand fall away. Jack came up behind her. "They're coming straight here." "I know." He touched her shoulder. "We can talk to them. Maybe there's room to know." The word came out sharper than she meant. She softened it. "Not tonight." They stood together in silence, while the hoofbeats grew louder, a slow, deliberate rhythm that matched her pulse. Dust rose in the twilight, catching the dying sun like smoke from a distant fire. 6 riders fanned out at the edge of the yard, halting just beyond easy pistol range. Slade Carver dismounted, first hat in hand, the picture of frontier courtesy. His voice carried clear across the open ground. "Evening, Mrs. Kane. Mr. Kane. Fine night for a ride." Nora felt Jack tense beside her. She kept her face calm, the same calm she had worn in courtrooms from Austin to Cheyenne years ago. Inside, something old and cold uncoiled. She stepped onto the porch, letting the screen door creak behind her. "Private land, Mr. Carver," she said, voice even. "You're trespassing." Slade smiled, thin and practiced. "Just here to talk business. Same offer stands. Generous one, too. Be a shame if folks missed an opportunity." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of horse sweat and oiled leather. Nora's eyes flicked to the new rider again, young Caleb, she guessed from the way he kept glancing at Slade for approval. A deserter, probably. She had seen enough of them in her time. Jack moved to stand beside her. "We've given our answer." Slade's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Answers can change, Mr. Kane, especially when the trail gets crowded." Nora met his gaze. For one heartbeat, the mask slipped, just a flicker, but enough. Slade's expression faltered, the smallest crack in the mask of charm. He recovered quickly, tipping his hat. 3 days, he said. After that, we'll need to hear something final. For everyone's sake. The riders turned their mounts, dust swirling in their wake. Nora watched until the last silhouette vanished over the ridge. Only then did she let her shoulders drop the fraction they had been holding. Jack exhaled. They're not going to let this go. No, she said quietly. They're not. She turned back toward the house, the lamp glow spilling warm across the porch boards. But the warmth didn't reach her. Somewhere in the dark beyond the corral, the wind carried the faint jingle of a spur against rock. Someone had stayed behind to watch. Nora closed the door softly behind them. The latch clicked like a hammer, falling on an empty chamber. She stood in the doorway a long moment, listening to the house settle to Jack's footsteps, moving toward the kitchen. Then she reached up, fingers brushing the small iron key she kept hidden above the lintel. The key to the false bottom in the wagon bed, where the old Colt still waited, oiled and loaded. She didn't take it down. Not yet. But the choice was no longer hers alone. The riders had seen her face. They had heard her voice. And in that single, unguarded heartbeat, when their eyes met, something ancient had recognized something older still. The quiet years were over. She let her hand fall, turned, and walked inside to face the man who still believed they could live ordinary lives. Outside, the night deepened, and the watcher in the grass did not move. The moon had risen thin and pale over the Bozeman Trail, turning the grass silver and the shadows long. Nora stood on the porch boards, and the night air cool against her skin, carrying the faint metallic bite of railroad smoke from somewhere far down the line. Jack stayed just inside the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, as if he could hold the house steady against whatever was coming. The riders reined in at the yard's edge, horses blowing softly, hooves shifting in the dirt. 6 of them, dark shapes against the moonlit plain. Slade Carver swung down first, easy in the saddle, like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He removed his hat with deliberate courtesy, holding it against his chest. The black bandana at his throat caught a sliver of moonlight. "Mrs. Kane," he said again, voice smooth as river stone. "Didn't mean to startle you folks earlier. Just thought we'd finish our talk proper under the stars." Nora felt her pulse rise, steady, but insistent the way it used to before a courtroom or a street corner standoff. She let her hands tremble just enough, visible, believable. and clasped them in front of her apron. Inside her mind, cataloged the slight limp in Slade's right leg when he stepped forward, old cavalry wound. The way his men fanned out without orders, covering angles like soldiers pretending to be outlaws. The youngest one, young Caleb, gripping his carbine too high, again knuckles white. Jack stepped halfway out. "We said our piece this afternoon." Slade's smile stayed polite. "And I heard it clear. But times move fast out here. Union Pacific's pushing more freight north every week. Water's worth more than gold when the tanks run dry. 20,000 cash. That's not charity, Mr. Kane. That's opportunity." Nora let her voice waver. "We've worked this land 6 years. It's all we have." "Exactly why you should consider it," Slade replied, stepping closer. His boots crunched softly on the gravel. "Land's no good if you can't hold it. And folks who don't adjust, well, they get left behind." One of the riders edged his horse sideways, trying to angle behind her. Nora marked it without turning her head. Amateur. She kept her eyes on Slade, letting fear show in the way her shoulders hunched. But her mind was steady, tracing the old scar that ran from his knee to hip. Union saber cut, she guessed from the way he favored it. Cavalry not born outlaw. The kind who learned discipline before he learned greed. Jack's hand tightened on the doorframe. "You threatening us?" Carver Slade lifted both palms, hat still in one. "Threatening, no sir. Offering. But generosity has a clock on it." He reached inside his vest, slow, deliberate. His men tensed. Young Caleb's rifle jerked up an inch. Nora noted the twitched nerves not training. Slade produced a small card cream, stock edges crisp. He extended it toward Nora. She took it with fingers that shook just right, letting the paper tremble between them. The ink was black and bold. Slade Carver, Red Hollow Associates. No address, no need. 3 days, he repeated, voice dropping softer. "Think on it. For your husband's sake. For the trail's sake." Nora lowered her gaze to the card, then back to his face. We'll talk it over." Slade nodded, once satisfied. But as he turned to remount, his eyes lingered on her a second too long, searching, measuring. A flicker of something crossed his features, recognition maybe, or the ghost of a rumor he'd heard in a Cheyenne saloon years back. Iron Nora, the Marshal who dropped 19 men in 40 seconds down in Texas. The name that still made deserters check their back trails. He swung into the saddle without another word. The riders pulled away, hooves thudding soft into the night. Dust hung in the moonlight like smoke from a dying fire. Nora waited until the sound faded completely. Only then did she let the tremble leave her hands. She folded the card once, tucked it into her apron pocket. Jack exhaled hard. "They're gone. For now." He looked at her, really looked. "You were shaken." "I was." She met his eyes, but not the way they think. Jack stepped closer, voice low. "Nora, if there's something you're not telling me." She touched his arm, light, steady. "Not tonight." He searched her face, doubt creeping in like frost on a window pane. She saw it settle there, small but real, the first crack in the trust they'd built over 6 quiet years. She felt it like a bruise. They went inside. The lamp flickered low. Jack poured fresh coffee neither of them drank. Nora stood at the window again, staring into the dark where the riders had vanished. Somewhere out there, one of them had stayed watching, waiting, listening. She felt the weight of the key above the lintel like a promise she hadn't wanted to keep. The old Colt waited beneath the wagon boards, clean and cold. She hadn't touched it in years. Tonight, the thought of it didn't frighten her anymore. It frightened her that it didn't. Jack came up behind her again. "We can sell," he said quietly. "Take the money. Start somewhere new." Nora didn't answer right away. She watched the moon slide higher, turning the plains ghost white. In the silence, she heard it, the faint distant jingle of a spur against stone, too close to be chance. She turned to Jack, voice soft. "Maybe." But the word tasted like a lie, and they both knew it. Outside, the watcher in the shadows did not move. And in the pocket of her apron, Slade Carver's card lay folded, its edges already curling from the heat of her hand. The wagon rattled slow along the rutted road, into Laramie crossing iron wheels singing against the new-laid Union Pacific rails that ran like a scar through the heart of town. Dust hung thick in the midday heat, smelling of coal smoke and horse sweat, and the faint, sweet rot of spilled grain from the freight yard. Nora kept the team at a walk, reins loose in her hands, letting the horses choose their own pace. She wore the same blue dress from yesterday apron, still-tied bonnet shadowing her eyes. No one would look twice at a ranch wife coming to town for flour and coffee. The main street was quiet for noon, too quiet. A few horses stood hip-shot at the hitch rails outside the saloon. A boy swept the boardwalk in front of the assay office. Nora tied the team in front of Ellie Shaw's general store, the faded sign creaking overhead in the hot wind. She stepped down, boots soft on the packed dirt, and pushed through the door. The bell above jingled once thin and lonely. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with the smell of tobacco leather and the sharp bite of vinegar from the pickle barrel. Ellie stood behind the counter, hands flat on the wood face, pale under the freckles. Two men lounged against the shelves, one leaning on a barrel of nails, the other idly spinning a spur rowel with his boot heel. Boone Stryker. Nora knew him the moment she saw the rattlesnake band on his hat and the dried rattles tied to his gun belt. Slade Carver's enforcer. The third man, younger, scarred across the cheek, stood closer to Ellie, arms folded, watching her like she might bolt. Ellie's eyes flicked to Nora, quick and grateful, then away. "Morning, Ellie," Nora said, voice gentle, almost timid. She moved down the aisle, picking up a sack of flour as if that were all she'd come for. "Got any of that St. Louis coffee Jack likes?" Ellie swallowed. "In the back. I'll fetch it." Boone Stryker straightened. "Town's changing, Mrs. Shaw. Protection fees going up. $50 a month now. Starting today." Ellie's hands trembled as she reached for the coffee tin. "I already paid this month. Sheriff Buck Harlan said, Sheriff don't run things no more." Boone cut in, voice low and flat. He swept an arm across the counter. A stack of canned peaches toppled, rolling across the floor with dull thuds. 50. Cash. Nora paused in the aisle, basket in hand, and stepped around the spilled cans without hurry. "Oh my," she said softly. "What a shame. Ellie, do you have a broom? I'd be happy to help clean up." The scarred man turned, irritation flashing. Boone's eyes narrowed on her. "Mind your business, lady." Nora met his gaze, letting her shoulders round just a fraction, the picture of a frightened ranch wife. But her voice stayed even. "My husband's family helped build this town. Ellie's grandfather gave him his first job when he came west. So, yes, it is my business." Boone stepped closer, looming. "Careful, Mrs. Kane." "Accidents happen?" "They do," Nora answered quietly. "Like the one your man had near Crow Creek 2 weeks back." The fall, no one reported. She let the words hang soft but clear. Funny thing about accidents. You never know who might have seen one. The room went still. Boone's face darkened, but something flickered behind his eyes, unease, the quick calculation of a man who'd thought no witnesses existed. The scarred man shifted weight, hand drifting toward his holster, then stopping. Ellie froze, tin in hand. Boone exhaled through his nose. "We'll finish this later," he muttered to Ellie. To Nora, he added low, "You talk too much for a rancher's wife." Nora smiled faintly, the same small, careful smile she'd used in saloons and courtrooms long ago. "I just listen." They left without another word, boots heavy on the boards. The bell jingled again as the door swung shut. Ellie sagged against the counter. "Thank you, Nora. But you shouldn't have. Those men." Nora knelt to gather the scattered cans movements, slow. "They're tightening the noose. That's what scares me most." Ellie fetched the broom voice, trembling. "Sheriff Harlan says they're just passing through. Some land deal." Nora paused, one can still in her hand. "Is that what he told you?" She set the can down carefully. "Because his deputy told Sarah Boone something different when they pressured her into selling her late husband's claim last month." Ellie's eyes widened. Understanding dawned slow and heavy. "They're buying up every water source along the Bozeman Trail," Nora continued, voice low. "Or forcing sales. But it's not just about ranch land. It's the shortest route from Cheyenne to the Black Hills. Long stretches without telegraph. Empty country. Perfect for moving things that aren't meant to be seen." Ellie gripped the broom handle. "You think they're—" Nora cut in gently. "I think you should visit your sister in Cheyenne. A week, maybe 2. I can't just close the store." Nora rose, brushing dust from her apron. "Please, Ellie. This town is about to change. When it does, it's better if some people aren't here to see it." Outside, Nora loaded the wagon. Her hand brushed the false bottom she'd built years ago, the one place the old Colt still rested untouched. She didn't lift the board. Not yet. She climbed to the seat, flicked the reins, and started the team toward home. Halfway up the rise overlooking the northern trail, she stopped. From there, she could see the land Slade Carver had been quietly buying piece by piece, claim by claim. 6 years ago, she tracked a similar pattern in Texas: stolen Army rifles, hidden in cattle drives, shipments rerouted through frontier towns. The investigation had been shut down without explanation. Now the pattern was repeating. Her fingers rested on the reins, steady. The wind carried the distant whistle of a locomotive, mournful and far away. When she reached the ranch, Jack was waiting on the porch, face tight. A rider had come and gone, Sheriff Buck Harlan's deputy, asking about the water rights, asking about their plans. Nora dismounted slowly. Jack met her eyes. "They're not asking anymore," he said quietly. "They're pressing." She nodded once. The threat was no longer just at their gate. It had walked into town, into Ellie's store, into the lives of people who had never asked for any part of this. Jack looked toward the horizon where the rails disappeared into the haze. "What do we do?" Nora didn't answer right away. She felt the folded card in her apron pocket to Slade Carver's name still sharp against her fingers. Somewhere down the trail, a rider was already carrying word back to the gang the quiet ranch wife wasn't as quiet as she seemed. She touched Jack's arm, light but firm. "We wait," she said. "But not forever." In the silence that followed, the wind rose again, carrying the faint, unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, still distant, but coming closer. Jack heard it too. His hand tightened on hers. Neither of them moved. The night settled over the Kane ranch like a heavy wool blanket, thick and suffocating. No moon tonight, only a scatter of stars cold enough to cut. The wind had died, leaving the air still carrying the faint metallic scent of the rails and the dry, dusty smell of sage that never quite left the Wyoming plains. Inside the house, the lamp burned low. Jack sat at the table cleaning his rifle by habit, more than need the soft click of the lever action. The only sound, besides the occasional pop of the wood stove. Nora stood at the window curtain, pulled aside just enough to see the yard. She hadn't slept. The card from Slade Carver still sat folded in her apron pocket edges, worn from her thumb, tracing them over and over. She told herself it was nothing, just another bluff, another push. But the quiet felt wrong too, complete like the hush before a stampede. Jack looked up. "You're pacing again." "I'm not pacing," she said. But she moved anyway, crossing to the stove to stir the coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He set the rifle down. "Nora, talk to me." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Her fingers brushed his and lingered a second too long. "They won't wait 3 days," she said quietly. "Not after today." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then we ride to Cheyenne. Tell the Marshal's office. Or Fort Laramie. Someone." She shook her head. "They own half the deputies between here and the Missouri. And the other half look the other way." He stared at her, the lamplight carving shadows under his eyes. "You sound like you've done this before." She didn't answer. The silence stretched until it hurt. Outside, the first sound was glass breaking sharp, deliberate. Then a flash of white light exploded through the front window, blinding, searing. A muffled crack followed like a powder charge going off in a tin can. Nora's body moved before her mind caught up old reflex, dropping low hand, reaching for the hidden pocket in her skirt. But the flashbang had done its work, ears ringing, vision swimming white. Boots crashed through the door. 6 men moving fast, disciplined. No shouting, no wasted motion. They flowed in like water through a broken dam, 2 covering the corners, 2 sweeping the room, 2 straight for her. Military, not common outlaws. Cavalry hand signals, tight spacing, controlled breathing. Jack lunged for his rifle. A rifle butt cracked across his shoulder, dropping him to his knees. Nora started forward, instinct pure and useless, but a gloved hand clamped her wrist, twisting it behind her back. Zip cord bit into her skin, tight enough to bruise, but not cut. "Professional." "Target secured," one said, voice flat. No complications. They dragged her toward the door. She twisted once, just enough to see Jack on the floor, blood trickling from his temple where he'd hit the table edge. His eyes met hers, wide, helpless, furious. He tried to rise. Another boot pressed him down. "Nora, stay down," she said, voice steady even as her heart hammered. "Just stay down." Slade Carver waited outside, silhouetted against the faint starlight-dappled gray stallion stamping behind him. He stepped forward as they pushed her past. "Mrs. Kane," he said, almost gentle. "Sorry for the rough visit. Had to make sure we got your attention." She met his gaze. "No tremble now. No pretense. You've got it." His smile was thin. "Good. Because your husband's about to get a stronger reason to sign those papers. You'll stay with us until he does." They lifted her onto a horse, bareback hands, bound in front. The ride was fast, 17 minutes by her count every turn. And landmark burned into memory the dip, where the trail crossed the dry wash, the stand of lodgepole pine that marked the old stage road, the faint glow of Laramie peaks rising black against the sky. They pulled up at an abandoned stage station, timber's weathered gray roof sagging under years of snow. Lanterns burned inside, throwing yellow light through broken windows. Crates were stacked along the loading dock, military stencils, serial numbers she recognized from Texas Springfield rifles, disassembled Gatling components. Wooden cases marked Ordnance Department. Not just guns. Documents too, rolled maps, sealed envelopes, the kind that carried troop movements and tribal treaty notes. Boone Stryker supervised the tying. He cinched the cord around her wrists to the chair in the old station master's office, deliberately positioning her to face the activity outside. Overconfidence. They wanted her to see how helpless she was. Slade leaned in the doorway, arms folded. "This won't take long. Your husband's already received our terms. Sign and you walk. Refuse." He let the word hang. Nora tested the cord's subtly old Marshal technique, flexing just enough to find a give. "Why our ranch?" she asked, voice quiet. "There's nothing special about it." Slade's eyes narrowed. "Actually, there is. The Bozeman Trail's about to become very important. Certain opportunities are opening up. Your water rights complete the route." He straightened. "And you, Mrs. Kane, are the key to making your husband see reason. A disturbance at the loading dock crates shifting a man cursing low." Slade turned. Nora used the moment to work the cords again. One loop loosened barely. Slade glanced back. For a single heartbeat, their eyes locked. Something in her face made him pause, something cold, something that had lived in outlaw nightmares for years. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "You know too much, Kane." "Way too much." Nora didn't answer. She let the mask fall away just enough. Slade's jaw tightened. "No more games." He turned to Boone. "Double the guard. No one moves without my word." Boone nodded, stepping out. Alone in the dim office, Nora exhaled slowly. The cords gave another fraction. She felt the familiar ache in her shoulders, the sting of rope on skin. 6 years of quiet had not dulled the skill. Outside, lanterns bobbed as men unloaded more crates. Somewhere in the dark, Jack was alone on the ranch, bleeding, waiting for a telegram that might never come. She closed her eyes for 1 second, seeing his face on the floor, the blood, the helplessness. Then she opened them again. The old road back the quiet years, the simple life was gone. She flexed her wrists once more. The cord slipped another inch. Somewhere beyond the window, a horse snorted restless. And in the silence, Nora Kane began to wait, not for rescue, but for the moment when waiting would end. The abandoned stage station smelled of old wood rot and gun oil, the kind of sharp, oily scent that clung to crates long after the lids had been pried open. Lanterns hung from rusted hooks, throwing jagged pools of yellow across the warped floorboards. Nora sat tied to the station master's chair wrists, raw under the cord ankles lashed to the legs. The position forced her to face the loading dock through the open doorway, deliberate, she knew. They wanted her to watch, to understand how small she had become. Outside, men moved in quiet rhythm boots, scraping on gravel crates, thudding as they were shifted from wagons to the platform. Springfield rifles gleamed dully in the lantern light barrels wrapped in oiled cloth. Beside them, wooden cases stamped Ordnance Department, Gatling components broken down for easy transport. And then the smaller bundles rolled maps, sealed envelopes, the kind that carried more than steel. She caught a glimpse of one unrolled just long enough troop dispositions along the Sioux and Cheyenne lines, treaty notes marked in red ink. Not just guns, secrets, the kind that could shift borders or start wars. Her shoulders ached from the cords, but she kept her breathing even. Panic would only tighten the knots. She had learned that the hard way years ago. A young guard stepped into the doorway, young Caleb, the one who held his rifle wrong. He carried a tin cup of water, hands unsteady. He hesitated at the threshold, glancing back toward the dock where Slade Carver's voice carried low, giving orders. Caleb approached, boots scuffing the boards. "Here," he muttered, holding the cup to her lips. Water sloshed cold against her chin. She drank slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Thank you, Caleb." He flinched at his name. "How'd you 4th Cavalry?" she said softly. "Fort Richardson." The way you scanned the room habit from the parade ground. You never quite lost it. He swallowed Adam's apple working. You ain't supposed to talk to me. I know. She let silence settle between them, heavy as the night outside. But you're wondering, aren't you? Why a water rights grab needs military teams. Why those crates carry artillery stamps. Caleb's eyes flicked to the dock, then back. I signed on for protection money, not this. Nora nodded once small. Slade Carver tell you what really happened in Texas? To the last crew that moved cargo like this, he shifted weight. He said it was Marshal's. Overreach. It was Marshal's, she said quietly. One Marshal. And she didn't stop until the whole line was broken. Caleb's grip tightened on the empty cup. You're just trying to turn me. Maybe. She leaned forward the fraction the cords allowed. But you're already turning yourself. Every time you look at those crates and wonder what's really in them. He stared at her a long moment, then stepped back abruptly. Shut up, but he didn't leave right away. He stood there breathing hard, eyes darting between her and the activity outside. Nora let him go without another word. She had planted the seed. That was enough for now. Through the doorway, she watched the crates being prepared, smaller bundles separated, wrapped in canvas marked for transfer. Maps of Sioux and Cheyenne deployments, treaty notes, intelligence summaries. Enough to sell to the highest bidder, foreign or domestic. Enough to make the Bozeman Trail worth killing for. Her mind turned to Jack. Alone on the ranch, bleeding from the temple, waiting. The thought cut deeper than the cords. Hours passed, slow measured by the shifting lanterns and the low voices of the men. She worked the cords again, subtle flexes, feeling the give. Not enough yet. Not quite. Then a rider came in hard from the south road, dust swirling in the lantern glow. He spoke low to Slade. Nora caught fragments, Sheriff Harlan's man. Message for the husband, sign or the town burns. Slade nodded once. The rider mounted again and vanished into the dark. Nora closed her eyes for one heartbeat. The weight settled heavier, Ellie's store, Doc Silas Reed's clinic, the handful of families who had trusted the quiet life along the trail. They were paying now for her silence, for her waiting. She opened her eyes. The cords had slipped another fraction. She could almost feel the old rhythm returning, the patience that had once made her the best tracker in 5 territories. Young Caleb reappeared at the doorway, face pale. He didn't speak, just looked at her, then at the crates, then back. Something in his posture had changed, shoulders lower, rifle held looser. He turned away without a word. Nora exhaled slowly. The seed had taken root. Outside, the lanterns dimmed one by one. The station grew quieter, men bedding down in shifts. She sat in the dark, listening to the creak of timbers, the distant snort of horses, the faint metallic clink of a crate being secured. Somewhere, miles away, Jack would be reading a note delivered under lantern light, sign the papers. Or Laramie crossing Burns. She felt the cords bite deeper into her wrists. The pain was sharp, familiar. It reminded her she was still alive, still able to choose. She flexed again, slow, deliberate. Another inch. The night stretched on cold and endless. And in the silence, Nora Kane waited not for rescue, but for the moment when waiting would cost more than she could bear. Somewhere beyond the station walls, a horse shifted restlessly, and far down the trail a town held its breath. The lanterns had burned low in the old stage station, their flames guttering in the draft that slipped through cracked boards. The air tasted of lamp oil and stale tobacco, undercut by the faint metallic bite of gun grease from the crates stacked along the walls. Nora sat motionless in the chair, wrists chafed raw beneath the cords, every breath measured. Hours had passed since the last rider left with the message for Jack. She could still see his face in the flash of the lantern blood on his temple, eyes wide with a helplessness she had never wanted him to feel. Footsteps approached from the outer room, heavy, deliberate, the cadence of a man who had once marched in formation. The door creaked open. Colonel Wade Harlan stepped through, coat dusted with trail grit, his face lit from below by the lantern he carried. He was older than she remembered from the wanted notices and the fragments of reports she had pieced together over 6 years, gray at the temple's lines, carved deep around the mouth. But the posture was unmistakable, West Point straight command, still in the set of his shoulders. He set the lantern on the desk, flame flaring briefly. His eyes settled on her. So he said quietly, "It's you." Nora met his gaze without flinching. No more trembling. No more pretense. Iron Nora, he continued, the name coming out like a curse wrapped in amusement. The Marshal who wouldn't look away in Texas. The one who cost me 3 good officers and half a pipeline. I thought the stories were exaggerated. But here you are, tied to a chair like some frontier housewife who got in over her head. She let the silence answer for a moment. Then softly, you buried the investigation, pulled strings, made sure Levi Kane's death looked like an accident. Harlan's smile thinned. Levi Kane was a good man. Too good. He asked questions he shouldn't have, about shipments, about who was really paying for them. He paced slowly, boots scraping the boards. You've been watching us 6 years. Living quiet, playing house. And for what to sit here and watch it all come apart anyway? Nora's voice stayed level. For justice. The kind that doesn't get buried. Harlan stopped in front of her. Justice. He almost laughed. You think this is about justice? This is business. The Bozeman Trail opens new routes, new markets. And the information in those crates, that's worth more than gold. Baron Victor's stall is waiting at Puget Sound. Once it reaches him, the fatherland remembers its friends. He leaned closer. You could have walked away, stayed the quiet ranch wife. Instead, you kept digging. And now look at you, Iron Nora, reduced to a bargaining chip. The words stung not because they were new, but because they landed on old wounds. She felt the echo of Levi's voice in her head, patient, steady, telling her reputation with a gun solved problems, but also created them. She had believed him then. She had tried to believe it for 6 years. Young Caleb stood in the doorway, rifle cradled, face pale in the lantern glow. He had been listening. Harlan didn't notice him yet. Nora looked past Harlan, straight at Caleb. You still think this is about protecting the trail? She asked quietly. Or do you see what it really is? Selling maps of Sioux and Cheyenne deployments, treaty notes, troop movements to a foreign power. That's not loyalty, Caleb. That's treason. Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. His eyes flicked to Harlan, then back to her. Harlan turned, following her gaze. Something to say, boy. Caleb swallowed. Sir. The crates. Those aren't just rifles. Harlan's face hardened. You were told what you needed to know. Nora spoke again, soft but clear. You took an oath once. To the United States. Not to a colonel who sells secrets for gold. Not to a baron who'll use them against your own people. Caleb's breath came short. He looked at the crates, at the maps, half unrolled on the table at Harlan's face. Something cracked in his expression, small but real. Harlan stepped toward him. Don't listen to her. She's playing you. But the doubt had taken hold. In that moment of distraction, a shout came from the loading dock, sharp, urgent. Strikers gone. took the documents, rode north toward the sound Harlan spun. What Boone Stryker had slipped away in the confusion saddlebags, heavy with the rolled maps and sealed envelopes. The sound of hooves faded fast into the night, heading for Puget Sound. Harlan cursed under his breath. Get after him. Now men scrambled. The station erupted into motion. Nora sat still, watching it all. The cords had loosened enough now she could feel the give. But she didn't break them yet. Not here. Not while Harlan still stood in front of her face, flushed with sudden fear. He turned back to her eyes, cold. You planned this. She didn't deny it. I waited 6 years for the right moment. You gave it to me. Harlan stared at her a long moment. Then he laughed, short, bitter. Iron Nora. Still the same. But you're not walking out of here clean. Not this time. He stepped closer, hand drifting toward his holster. Your husband will sign, or he'll watch the ranch burn, and you'll watch him do it. Nora felt the old cold settle in her chest, the same cold that had carried her through Sweetwater, through Texas. But this time, it carried Levi's voice too, and Jack's face on the floor, and the town of Laramie Crossing waiting for a fire that might still come. She looked at Harlan. You think this ends with me tied to a chair? He smiled thinly. I think it ends with you watching everything you built burn. Outside, the hoofbeats of pursuit faded into the night. Boone Stryker was gone with the documents, with the secrets, with the last piece of leverage that could still save or damn them all. Nora flexed her wrists once more. The cord slipped another fraction. Harlan turned away, barking orders into the dark. In the silence that followed, Nora Kane sat alone in the lantern glow, listening to the wind move through the broken timbers. She thought of Jack. She thought of Levi. And she knew the quiet years were truly over. Somewhere far down the trail, a rider carried secrets toward the sea. And back at the ranch, a man waited for a decision that had already been made. The sea wind off Puget Sound carried salt and pine sharp enough to sting the eyes. Dawn had broken gray and reluctant over the narrow beach waves, slapping against barnacled rocks like slow, deliberate applause. Nora crouched on a ridge of driftwood and shale, the old Colt heavy in her hand barrel, still warm from the ride. Below the temporary camp, sprawled along the shingle, a half-dozen tense horses picketed, and 15 men moving with the tense precision of soldiers who knew they were cornered. Baron Victor Stahl stood apart, coat flapping in the wind, watching the Kaiser Wilhelm anchored offshore black hull, Prussian colors limp against the leaden sky. Boone Stryker paced beside him. Saddlebags slung over one shoulder, the rolled documents inside, pressing against the leather like a guilty heart. Nora felt Jack beside her, breath shallow. He had ridden hard through the night after the Marshal's men cut him loose from the ranch. His shoulder was bandaged, roughly, blood already seeping through again. He hadn't spoken much since they caught up with the trail, only that he wouldn't let her face this alone. Farther down the beach, the USS Adams lay hove to smoke curling from her stacks. A warning shot had already cracked across the water an hour earlier, the shell splashing short but close enough to send spray high. Captain Elias Holt wasn't bluffing. Hoofbeats sounded behind them, soft, careful. Cade Harlan eased up on foot hat, low Marshal's badge glinting dully. Running Fox had brought word at first light the cavalry deserter young Caleb had turned ridden out under cover of dark and given them the exact position of the camp and the documents. Cade knelt beside Nora. Adams has the sea locked. We've got the ridge. They can't run. Nora nodded once. Her eyes never left Boone Stryker, the man who had held the knife over Levi Kane 6 years ago. The man who had laughed while Levi bled out on a Texas street. She felt the old cold rise in her chest, slow, familiar, almost comforting. But beneath it, the ache was sharper now. 6 years of silence, 6 years of pretending the past was buried, 6 years of Jack believing she was only a ranch wife. All of it led here to this gray beach, to this moment. She rose slowly. I'm going down. Jack's hand caught her wrist. Nora, I have to see his face, she said quietly. When he knows it's over. Kate exhaled. We'll cover you. She descended the ridge boots, crunching on shale the Colt held low along her thigh. The wind tugged at her coat. She made no effort to hide. Let them see her coming. A sentry spotted her first. Rider rifles swung. Men froze. Boone's striker turned face paling as recognition hit. Iron Nora, he breathed. Baron Stahl stepped forward, contempt curling his lip. One woman. American arrogance has no limit. Nora stopped 30 yards out, close enough to see the sweat on Boone's brow, far enough to move, if needed. 6 years is a long chase, Boone, she said, voice carrying clear over the wind and waves. It ends here. Boone's hand drifted toward his holster. You should have stayed quiet. I tried. She lifted the Colt slow and deliberate. For Levi's sake, for Jack's, for the town that never asked to be part of this. Baron Stahl barked a laugh. The documents are under diplomatic seal. Your Navy has been informed. You have no jurisdiction. Nora's eyes stayed on Boone. Tell him, Boone. Tell him what really happened in Texas. What you did to Levi Kane when he got too close to the truth. Boone's face twisted. That wasn't you held the knife, she said softly. I know. I've known for 6 years. The Baron drew his pistol. Silence him. Boone's resolve cracked. No, my oath was to the United States, not to treason. He turned to Nora. Secretary Elias Thorne. He's the one. Leaked the intelligence. Buried your case. Ordered Levi silenced. Nora felt the words land like stones in still water. The rot went higher than she had dared hope, and deeper than she had feared. Jack's rifle cracked from the ridge. The shot was clean, struck the document case in Stahl's hand, spinning it into the sand. In the same heartbeat, Nora drew Colt leveled at Boone before anyone could react. Chaos erupted. Men dove for cover. Stahl shouted in German. Rifles came up, but Nora didn't fire. She held steady eyes locked on Boone. Drop it. Live. Testify. Give us Thorne. Give us the whole line. Boone stared at her. Then at the documents scattered in the sand. Then at Stahl, who was already backing toward the water pistol raised. A second shot rang out Jack from cover, putting a round into the sand at Stahl's feet. The Baron froze. Cade Harlan's voice boomed from the ridge. This is U.S. Marshal Cade Harlan. You are surrounded. Lay down your arms. Marshal riders crested the ridge, rifles leveled. The Adams fired another warning shot across the bow of the Kaiser Wilhelm. The Prussian ship's deck crew hesitated. Boone let his pistol fall. Slowly, he raised his hands. I'll talk, he said hoarsely. Thorne, the payments, all of it. Nora stepped forward. She kicked the fallen pistol away. Then she knelt, gathering the scattered documents with her free hand. Maps, letters, names. One envelope bore the seal of the War Department. She stood again. Boone watched her eyes hollow. You didn't kill me, he said. No, she answered. But you'll wish I had. Behind her, Jack came down the slope, rifle still ready. He reached her side hand, brushing her arm. She felt him tremble just once. Stahl tried one last time. Diplomatic immunity, Cade cut him off, voice flat. Not for espionage on American soil. Captain Holt has orders from Washington. You're under arrest. Marshals moved in. Boone was cuffed. Stahl's men dropped their weapons one by one. But in the confusion, Stahl lunged for the scattered papers. A match flared in his hand. Flames licked canvas. 2 maps caught curling black. Nora lunged, but too late. The wind took the ashes out over the water. She stood there watching them burn. Jack touched her shoulder. "We got most of it." "Most," she echoed. Boone was led away. Kate approached, holding out a pair of cuffs for Stahl. Nora looked at Jack. His face was pale eyes shadowed. He had seen her draw, seen her hold fire, seen the cost of both. She holstered the Colt. The barrel was still warm against her hip. The beach fell quiet except for the waves and the creak of the Adams swinging at anchor. She looked out at the gray water where the Kaiser Wilhelm's colors still flew defiant. Then back at Jack. Neither spoke, but in the silence between them, something shifted, small, irreversible. The quiet years were gone, and whatever came next would carry the weight of everything they had lost. Somewhere in Washington, a name still waited to be spoken. And on the ridge, young Caleb watched from cover rifle lowered face, unreadable. The wind carried the smell of smoke and salt, and the tide kept coming in. The dawn light came slow over the Wyoming plains, pale gold bleeding into the gray that had settled after the storm. The Bozeman Trail stretched empty in the distance, rails glinting faint under the first sun. The ranch house stood quiet, 2 quiet porch boards still bearing the faint scorch marks from the flashbang nights before. Nora leaned against the railing arms, folded, staring at the grass that rolled forever toward the horizon. The wind carried the clean smell of wet sage and distant pine, but it didn't wash away the faint, lingering scent of gunpowder that clung to her coat. Jack stood beside her coffee tin in hand steam curling between them. His shoulder was bandaged fresh, the cloth already spotting red again from moving too soon. He hadn't complained. He never did. But she saw the way he favored it, the way his eyes tracked her face when he thought she wasn't looking. A rider came up the trail at an easy trot, Running Fox small and straight on his pony, a leather pouch tied to his saddle. The boy dismounted without flourish, boots soft on the dirt. He handed the pouch to Nora without meeting her eyes at first. "Cade Harlan," he said simply. "Said to give it to you." Nora opened it. Inside a worn Marshal's badge, the silver dulled by years, but still sharp-edged. A folded note in Cade's careful hand. "The hunt's not over. Thorne's under investigation, but some doors stay shut. If you ever want back in, the badge is yours." She turned it over in her fingers, feeling the weight not heavy, but familiar. Too familiar. Jack watched her. "You going to pin it on?" She didn't answer right away. She slipped the badge into her pocket next to the folded card from Slade Carver that she still hadn't burned. Hoofbeats sounded again lighter this time. Ellie Shaw and Doc Silas Reed rode up together, Ellie's buggy trailing behind with supplies. They dismounted slowly, faces lined with the kind of weariness that comes after surviving something you never asked for. Ellie stepped onto the porch first. "We brought coffee. Real coffee. And some of that St. Louis blend Jack likes." Nora managed a small smile. "You didn't have to." "We did." Ellie's voice cracked just once. "You saved the town, Nora. Not with guns blazing, just by being here. By seeing what no one else would." Doc Silas removed his hat, held it against his chest. "I treated 3 men last night. Gunshot wounds, Army-issue rounds. They talked about the crates, about the maps, about you." He looked at her steadily. "You didn't have to stay quiet all those years." Nora looked past them to the empty trail. "I thought I did." They stood there a long moment in the wind moving through the cottonwood's leaves, whispering secrets no one needed to hear anymore. Ellie reached out, touched Nora's arm light brief. "If you ever need anything." Nora nodded. "I know." They left as quietly as they'd come, buggy wheels creaking down the road toward Laramie Crossing, where shutters were opening again, and voices were rising in the streets, tentative but alive. Nora turned back to the railing. In her other hand, she held a small, faded photograph she'd taken from the mantel earlier. Levi Kane Young laughing hat, tipped back the two of them side by side on horseback, somewhere along this same trail. The edges were worn soft from years of handling. Jack stepped closer. He'd be proud. She didn't answer. She just looked at the picture, thumb brushing Levi's face. Jack set his coffee down. "We won, Nora. Thorne's name is out. The shipments are seized. The town's breathing again." She folded the photograph carefully, slipped it into the same pocket as the badge. "We won. But not clean." He took her hand. His fingers were rough warm. "No. Not clean." They stood together, watching the sun climb higher. The plain stretched endless gold now under the light. Somewhere far off, a locomotive whistle sounded distant, mournful, carrying freight north along the trail that had cost so much. Nora felt the weight in her pocket badge, photograph, old card. Reminders that the quiet was never coming back the same way. She could leave, pack up, ride out, disappear into the next territory where no one knew the name, Iron Nora. Or she could stay, live with the scar, be ready if the network stirred again, be the witness who carried the memory forward. Jack squeezed her hand once. "We've got time to decide." She looked at him, really looked. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, but the steadiness was still there. The man who had married her, knowing only half her story, and stayed anyway. She whispered, barely audible over the wind, "Justice never comes late. But it never comes free." Jack didn't reply. He just held her hand tighter. The wind rose again, sweeping across the grass, bending the stalks in slow waves. The trail lay open before them, empty for now, but never truly safe. Nora turned her face into the breeze. Somewhere in Washington, doors were still closing. Somewhere along the trail, a name might still whisper. And in her pocket, the badge rested heavy against the photograph of a brother who would never ride home. She didn't move. Neither did Jack. They stood there, two figures on the porch, while the sun climbed and the plains waited quiet, endless and forever changed. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.